going to round out our perspectives for the day with two more presentations. Penny Figgis is a conservation forest here in Australia. She's Vice Chair for the World Commission on Protected Areas in Australia, and she heads up the Australian Committee for the IUCN, and she's going to talk to us about cultural and well-being benefits perspective here. Penny.
Thanks very much, Stephen. Good afternoon, everyone. We should all sort of do a little bit of a breathe and stretch and whatnot. These are long sessions, and perhaps we should learn a particular symbol that somebody suggested earlier. You know, perhaps if we support the 5, we should all learn to sort of signal our support. So for the 5. Or the 50 as it is. Right, my job today I think is to talk about one of the most important areas of them all, which is basically, if you like, the social side, the other side. Dilys has talked about the human livelihood side, which of course is critically important. But there's another side, there's other sides to this as well. And I believe that at the end of the day, human beings, let's face it, our species, will only protect what it holds dear and what it sees as a priority. And one of the things that I think we've seen in the last couple of days in this country, we've had the G20 in Brisbane. The papers have been chock-a-block full of growth, more, as if we live on find an infinite planet, and quite frankly and sadly very little on our Congress, where we're talking literally about the survival of humanity on this small, finite planet. When you think what drives you? What drives you? Why are people in this room? Some of you are scientists, some of you are economists, but I bet you're not here because of that reason. I bet you're here because when you were children, you were exposed to nature. I bet you caught tadpoles. Hand up if you caught tadpoles as a kid. Okay, point taken. Okay, you're tadpole catchers. In other words, you felt nature, and use that funny word that scientists and economists never use. You love nature. You hold it in reverence. You hold it in respect. Whether you're an Indigenous person who holds it in a particular kind of deep cultural connection, but all of us have that cultural connection too. We call it different things. Okay. Well, I'm going I was going to talk a little bit about the area Dilys covered, but I'm not going. Oh my goodness, how did that switch to all those things? Was I hitting that accidentally? Okay, back, space, right. Okay, it's all right. Now I go enter.
Just use these up and down.
Right, okay, good. Okay, well the first thing I just wanted to talk about in terms of, I want to think of the future and what we can use as powerful tools both now and post-AHE. First of all, simply beauty, wonder, grandeur. These are things that speak to all humanity. I mean, there isn't a single culture on Earth that doesn't relate to the natural world in this way. Most of our protected areas worldwide, a lot of them were set aside because people walked into Yosemite and said, oh my God. And they did say, oh my God, in many cases, because it was seen as God's most beautiful places. And all over the world, very often, our most beautiful places have deep and sacred meaning to many people, spiritual meaning. And even if you're not a traditional believer, most people still on the top of a mountain feel a form of reverence. We need to tap into those feelings directly. We need to talk to them. I don't agree. It's funny, we just held a conference on ecosystem services. I profoundly believe it isn't an either or. I love those wonderful diagrams that were put up earlier about value. We need that, but we also need to tap into the heart and through many means, and I'll touch upon that in a minute. Okay, of course, it's not just beautiful places, cliffs, mountains, rivers, etc., but it's the wildlife on Earth. And the wildlife is often a way of reaching people. My grandchildren, my little granddaughter got her first iPad at 3. And we all know this is a danger, that the whole world is growing up behind screens. But one of the things I do with the iPad, I not only take her on bushwalks, but I also sit there and we go through zooborns and we look at all the wonderful critters around the world, or she shows an interest in, we watch David Attenborough and then we find more about meerkats and we go and explore that. You can use different means, but wildlife speaks to people in a particular way. And we're asked to think beyond AG, and I think we should. There's nothing wrong. People are often a bit dismissive. Oh, we can't just talk about furry animals and, you know, too much on pandas and whatnot. I don't believe that. I really think that's wrong. People do relate through animals. They do care. And I would love to think that some of our goals too can get a bit hard line. We stop slavery. We stop binding feet. We stopped all sorts of objectionable cultural practices. When are we going to stop eating shark fin soup? When are we going to really condemn people who give ivory presents? When are we going to get tough about some of the obnoxious, to be perfectly honest, cultural practices, and I hope I'm not offending people, I probably am, but that are ending up in an awful lot of dead animals? Okay. Sorry. By the way, all these, sorry, that's not going into the next one. Okay, that gorgeous bird, by the way, is a white-winged blue fairy wren. All my examples are from Australia. Talking about meaning and culture, I wanted to give you a little bit, obviously all the landscapes of the world have enormous meaning. I just wanted to give you, and rather, I'm sorry, I've distorted Tongariro, and probably every New Zealander in the room is saying, goodness, that's grown. Okay, how many minutes are there? I thought I had 2 lots. Okay, gosh. Okay, very quickly. Tongariro. The people here have a lovely story about the man going up to the top of the mountain, and he got cold. He got freezing cold. So he called to his sisters, who were priestesses in faraway Hawaii, and asked them to send fire to him. They sent fire all along through the trenches and crevasses of the Pacific and finally reached him and warned him. The description that's in the Maori myth is actually almost identical to the actual tectonic plates and the rim of fire of volcanic activity in the Pacific. Ancient people have an enormous amount of knowledge that they can pass on, and we have to continue to tap into that. Okay, just some examples of how culture has been used in our country in important ways for reconciliation. One example here is Brambrook, where Indigenous people in Victoria have been, a place has been built where they can tell their stories and interpretation of the land and add value. And this actually inspires a lot of other people to understand the story. So it's telling the stories, whether it's Indigenous people, whether it's us, telling the stories of land is a way to communicate and engage new generations of people. So it's, yes, the economics, yes, the science, but also let's tap into all of these other things post-Aichi. Here again, there are some wonderful stories here that are told in a book I have, which I meant to bring up, that we did on Aboriginal rangers in the Great Barrier Reef and in the Gulf, who are working on things like collecting ghost nets and monitoring. And it is not only giving them, this is an example of well-being. It's very interesting. In Indigenous communities, where people are given their proper recognition for their knowledge, for their skills, it's so interesting. All the social indicators of health improve. Substance abuse, we all know Indigenous people all around the world, because of the disjunct, the loss of contact with the nature in many cases, suffer a great deal of social problems. Well, it's fascinating. If you reconnect people, all the indicators of health and well-being go up. As I said, social, substance abuse or domestic violence, all of those things improve. Okay. Inspiration. We should be using all our wonderful artists, and here I'm very grateful to one of Australia's finest artists, Janet Lawrence, for giving me, allowing me to show her work. And we need to bring the artists into the picture, artists, musicians, writers. There should be more here. There should be more art. There should be more music. There should be more sculpture. Again, this is Marion Drew, a wonderful artist who helped us recently. There are lots of other great values, social values that we get from art. These old blokes, by the way, are my mates, including my husband, and we call ourselves the Geriatric Walking Group, and we're sitting on the top of the mountain there. Okay, my last thing, and I do want this one, please, Stephen. This is a wonderful picture of nature at its finest in Tasmania. The Tasmanians have a program of working with migrants, particularly new migrants and refugees who've suffered dreadfully. This is a Hazari Afghani and who's come to Australia in terrible circumstances, suffering post-traumatic stress. The Park Service has a program of taking such people into the parks on these great discovery tours. The happiness on this man's face, I think, is absolutely gorgeous. And it's interesting, those communities are now adopting parks as their focal point. They're taking their children, they're going fishing, and it's really helping in a great healing process. So, those are my grandchildren. Finally, I think just in terms of where we go post-Aichi, I've agreed with everything everybody has said, but I think it's just critically important that we don't say either or. We don't say, let's get hard figures on ecosystem services, let's get the finest science. Most people do not make decisions based on facts, and too often we think we can throw more facts and more facts and more facts. Look at climate change. If the facts really mattered, I'm afraid Australia might be in a very different position to the way it is right now. It's not only facts, it's our heart. Let's use all the means that we can to touch people, to touch their deepest feelings, whether it be by the beauty of Ansel Adams, photographs, writers, creativity, taking them, making sure that we give access to wonderful and beautiful places and build the kind of love that you all have in your heart as tadpole catchers. Thank you.